Right on. We're live. Yeah. All right. We're here live with Shawn, Carson, and Jess, Marion, and they are authors of many books, including the one we're going to be talking about today, which is Deep Trance Identification. So welcome, guys. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting us. Here in Vegas, Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, baby. Oh,
Vegas,
yeah.
baby.
So, I guess to start, I mean, either we can talk about you guys if that's you know, if that's going to be exciting for you, or we can just dive right into talking about DTI.
Let's just dive into DTI.
Okay. So, first of all, what is deep trance identification?
Deep trance identification is the primary or the fundamental way that we all learn. When you were a small child, you learned by watching adults and brothers and sisters and friends do things, whether it was learning to speak or walk or skills later in life. Let's do this.
Air conditioning.
Yeah.
Technical timeout.
It's okay.
So as I was saying, when you were small, you used a process of watching others and trying on what they were doing. And it wasn't really a conscious thing that you were doing. It was an unconscious experience. As we grow up, though, that gets trained out of us.
Yeah, think about when you were a kid and you went to the movies and you went to see Batman or something, and you come out of the movies and you are Batman. Like you just feel yourself being Batman. And that's this skill of imagination which a child has, which we kind of tend to start to lose when we're grown up, because we're not supposed to walk out of movies and go, ah!
Deep trance identification, though, allows us to get back in touch with this skill. And you may be thinking, well, why do we want to be in touch with this? To state it plainly, deep trance identification allows you to learn skills, change behaviors, thoughts, feelings, and become more authentically you in a way that's quick and is completely transformative.
Okay. So, as a child, in movies, right? And we watch a Batman movie, and we come out and we're like, oh, I'm Batman, and you know, we play the role of Batman. And you know, if you go and see it with your friends, then one guy, you know, somebody wants to be Batman, and the other one wants to be Robin, and you fight to no, I'm Batman, no, I'm Batman. How does that translate into being an adult and using this skill?
So for most people it doesn't, because they don't have the context in which to use those skills. So the child imagines himself to be Batman, but he doesn't have a context where he can fight crime. Okay, right? So it doesn't go anywhere. It's got no energy.
At least not most children.
Right, most kids. Now let's take a specific example, right, of a specific girl who watched superhero movies and associated into that. And she found context in which she could use those skills. She could the bad guy, okay? Then she could grow up into something amazing. Well, we have an example of such a person, Ronda Rousey, right? She's the world champion mixed martial arts fighter. And she says that she became that way, she became the way she is, partially because she would essentially mentally identify with superheroes as a kid. Wow. So it's the combination of the process of DTI with the context in which those skills can be used and developed.
Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, she is kick ass. She's fought many professional fights and she's won them all within, I think, 30 seconds. I mean, she's unbeatable in a way.
So if you meet Ronda Rousey, do not fight her.
Yeah, see her videos on YouTube. She's unbelievable, amazing.
Okay, so this is an example of seeing something as a child that you want to identify with,
right? And
then over time, beginning more and more to take on those characteristics,
right?
Right. So where does the deep
trance come in? Here's kids are always in trance. Don't think about trance as being you go and you close your eyes and you go into some trance. Trance is about a different state of being, a different state of thinking, there's different states of experiencing. I'll put in my hand up, Jess.
So am I.
So kids are always in trance. They're always in this world of imagination. That's a trance world. So kids are always in this world. As we grow up, we like go, well, I don't really do that because it's not what a grown-up does.
I don't do imagination.
Yeah. So
It's not my style.
right. So DTI is a way of formalizing the process in a grown-up way. So DTI itself was developed by a guy called Rykov, who was working in Russia, and Jess might want to talk about.
Sure. Before I mention that, going back to this idea of children being in trance, the typical brainwave that's associated with trance experiences, the theta waves, are found in children most of their lives, except for when they're sleeping, of course. Beta waves, what we have as conscious activity, doesn't develop until much later. So children are, we know, through neuroscience, experiencing various levels of trance states throughout childhood. Now, what Rykov did was absolutely genius. He was working with the Moscow Conservatory of Music, and this was during the Cold War era when there was competition around everything. It wasn't just who could build the biggest atom bomb, it was who could have the best composer, the best violinist in the world. So what Rykov did was he started an experiment. He took different groups of students at the conservatory, and some groups he hypnotized them and gave them positive suggestions about becoming more artistic. Some students, he didn't do anything. The third group of students he worked with, he hypnotized them and regressed them to being small children. And as small children, they associated into the stars of their particular field, the Rachmaninoff or the Beethoven. And in trance, grew up having experiences as that world-class musician. What ended up happening through these experiments, they found that the students who had an experience of trance where they received positive suggestions, they showed some improvement. However, the students who went through this deep trance identification experience, on a whole, scored significantly higher, both in technical ability on their graduation exams from the conservatory, and also their scores were off the charts for artistic interpretation of the pieces of music. Rykov discovered deep trance identification and used it to change the structures of these students' brains so that they were able to increase technical ability, but also enhance their artistic expression and interpretation, which is a powerful thing.
Wow. So these children basically spent, what, maybe an hour or two a day imagining being Rachmaninoff or imagining being Paganini, or perhaps a Russian composer and instrumentalist. And as a result of spending this time imagining being these musicians, they picked up on these skills, they picked up on the musicianship, they picked up on the ability to express themselves musically, as opposed to the students who just kind of said, I'm a good musician.
Yes.
Right. So it's really important to understand that these were students at a top music school. So this is not about someone who doesn't know how to play the piano imagining they're a great pianist and being able to play. Okay. In that particular case, it was about increasing the technical and artistic skills of somebody who already had the basics.
Okay. So if you took, for example, if you took children who don't know anything about music, or anybody who doesn't know anything about music, and then you do a deep trance identification set of sessions with them, or maybe just one session, and you were to have them imagine being Rachmaninoff or being an incredible musician or Beethoven. What would be the difference between these students who know nothing about music and the students who are in the who are already exceptional musicians? So
in the case of music, if somebody doesn't know which note on the piano to press, they can't play a tune, right? On the other hand, if you took somebody, or let's say it was an artist, let's say you wanted to paint in a very expressive way, you could do the process with that person because you can paint, right? They might not be able to draw perfectly, but if they wanted to paint in an artistic way, it would work with them. So it needs to be something where either they have technical skills or the technical skills are relatively easy to acquire.
Okay. So as long as the person that you are identifying with as
well, let's take a step back from that, because that we're talking about recall. Okay. The process that we have circumvents that in the sense that if someone is learning the instrument, say a person is in the process of learning how to play the piano, then the process that we have is going to not just improve their technical and artistic interpretive skills, but also improve how they learn the piano.
So you can take somebody and help them learn any skill by using deep trance identification.
Absolutely.
And what that essentially means is you have them imagine somebody, and I'm assuming that this could be a real person or an imaginary person.
Well, I think we should talk about the process separately, because there are steps. So this is not simply about, okay, I'm going to imagine I'm this person. That's not enough. Okay. I mean, it might be helpful for some things, but it's not going to be enough to really get you the skill set. If you're really serious about learning something or behaving in a certain way, it takes a certain amount of effort, and that's what the process is about. Okay. So if I just say, if you want to be Steve Jobs, imagine being Steve Jobs. I could write that down in a page, right? Our book is more than a page. Okay.
Well, so you could have just written that down the same, like just be Steve Jobs, be Steve Jobs, be Steve Jobs over and over again.
Yeah. That's not what the book says or what the process is.
I imagine not. So, okay, so well, obviously it goes a little bit further than just imagining being somebody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, tell us a little bit about what that's like.
So, allow me to share a little bit of a story with you. My first DTI experience years and years and years ago, before I realized what I was doing with the DTI, was with Milton Erickson. I had, throughout my university years, immersed myself in a tremendous amount of literature and recordings, pretty much anything I could get my hands on related to Erickson.
Milton Erickson, by the way, is considered to be something like the godfather of hypnosis. If it weren't for him, we probably wouldn't have advanced as quickly as we did in this field. Sorry, go on.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I was so fascinated with him and what he did for hypnosis. So I probably spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours with his material. And I hadn't done any type of live training, just was kind of a book nerd. When I had gone to my first live training, I kind of had this moment of panic, like, oh no, I have to actually do hypnosis. So I ended up kind of making this deal with myself. Okay, so if I'm all nervous about doing this whole hypnosis thing, what can I do to make it easier? Who do I know who's really good at hypnosis? Milton Erickson. What if I imagine being him for this somehow? And if I couldn't be me and be really good at this, I bet you I could be Erickson and be really good at it. And some very interesting things began to happen. The learning was super easy, first of all. My confidence went through the roof, and my abilities grew leaps and bounds. All the nonsense that had been running through my mind before then completely went away. It was a very surreal experience. Now, if I hadn't spent all of that time in the past familiarizing myself consciously and unconsciously with Erickson, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have had the same effect. So I had amassed all of these unconscious reference experiences with the model, and it created a very powerful experience. Our process takes people through how to create those unconscious reference experiences so that when you do the formal DTI process, it creates a deeply transformative shift within the individual, because your unconscious mind has all the pieces in place. The actual DTI itself is kind of like lighting the powder keg, if you will.
Wow. So just sort of to make sure that I understand, your process shows the readers or your clients how to basically outline a model of the person who you're going to do deep trance identification with, and then from there you are what happens next?
So I think and I'm going to pass this over to Shawn in a second. I just want to clarify about, it's not quite an outline. If your viewers who may be familiar with NLP modeling processes, the DILTS approach, where it's very left brain and you do have an outline of things that you're interested in, like values and beliefs. Our approach is not so much about an outline, it's about creating unconscious reference experiences with the model.
So let's talk a little bit more about the process. We can't go through the full thing because it's sort of in depth.
There's a book about it.
There's a book about it, and there's a manual about it. Both available on Amazon.com. There's Deep Trance Identification and Deep Trance Identification Companion Manual.
And there'll be a link below as well to that.
So the first thing that you need is a context. Okay, so in Jess's case, it was this course that she was on. In the case of Rykoff's students, it was they were in the business of music. Okay, so there has to be a context in which, if you want to go through this process, this is the context, this is the time and place in which I want to have these additional skills. I want to be different. That's the first thing. The second thing is choosing a model. Okay, the model you can choose has to be agreeable to your unconscious mind.
So what does that mean?
That means that let's take an example. Let's say you want to be awesome in business. Okay, and you say, I want to be like Steve Jobs. Okay, well, Steve Jobs was awesome in business, but he was lousy in terms of his personal life. Okay, he abandoned his family. He did all sorts of not very nice things to the people who worked at Apple. So his personal life, his interpersonal life, say, was not that great. So if you say, I want to be like Steve Jobs, your unconscious mind may go, well, actually, I don't like a lot of the things he did. Right. Okay, so your unconscious mind may go, no. And if your unconscious mind does that, even though your conscious mind thinks he's the right guy, the DTI is not going to be effective because your unconscious mind is going to reject it. Okay, so you have to go through a process either to get unconscious agreement to the DTI or to limit the part of the model that you're going to take on. So Steve Jobs, but only in the context of creativity, only in the context of doing a presentation.
So you can take bits and pieces of a person,
yeah,
and make then those internal reference experiences your own.
Yeah.
This was actually the experience I had. I did a modeling project with Steve Jobs, and right off the bat, my unconscious mind said, no way, because of this exact reason. So we have ways of contextualizing it, and we also detail in our process how to bring in counter models to balance these skill sets. My counter model, the opposite, was Steve Wozniak, who was awesome in his personal life. So you had these two extremes.
So Wozniak was a co-founder of Apple. So the context of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak was very much the same. Wozniak had all the technical skills of Steve Jobs, not the business skills, but much better personal skills. So you're kind of creating this blend where the Wozniak piece makes up for the deficiency of the Steve Jobs piece.
Okay, wow. So what was the next step in doing this then? So you built some reference experiences. You sort of get, and by that it's sort of like what an internal feeling of what it's like to be that.
Well, there's sort of two tracks of the next piece. There's the purely unconscious track. So this is how do you build rapport with the model. Right? Well, it's not like you can go up to Steve Jobs and say, hey, let's go for beers. Right. Okay. But what you can do to build the rapport, and why do you need the rapport with the model? Well, the research shows that your mirror neurons, those are the parts of your brain that allow you to take on the behavior of another person or to feel what they feel, think what they think. They only fire off if you respect that person, if you like that person. Okay? So you have to build a rapport with the model so that the right parts of your brain are going to start to fire off. So there's a number of ways of doing that. You can imagine being with the model. Okay? So you see the model in front of you, and as you see them, you begin to match their breathing. Okay? As you guys probably know, when you begin to match another person's breathing, the rapport improves. Okay? So you imagine seeing the model, you watch them breathing, and then you begin to match that yourself. So unconsciously, you're building the rapport. Okay?
And that's fascinating. So you can build rapport with a person inside of you that isn't really there.
Absolutely.
And not be clinically insane either.
Well,
Well.
you know, that's up to you.
That's your choice.
Yeah. You can dialogue with them as well. So you can ask them a question, not like you're making them speak, but then you listen to what they say. Maybe they talk back or maybe they don't. But you can get a lot of awesome information from what they say, even though it's coming from your unconscious. Okay. We also do dream incubation, where you incubate a dream where you will actually meet with a model and interact with a model. So there's a chapter in the book on the work of the founder of what's the guy's name, Jess?
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they wrote this book.
Yeah, I did read the book. I just forgotten the guy's name.
I'm sure the context.
The acting guy.
Oh, Stanislavski.
Yeah, Stanislavski. So it's method acting.
Method acting. Okay, right.
So method acting is a way of acting where you actually sort of become your character. It's creates all sorts of issues for the actors because, especially on the stage, they become the character over a period of time, and it can really change them. Anyway, method acting is essentially DTI for the stage. So I did a lot of work.
Are there any famous, sorry to interrupt, are there any famous actors that you can
Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man.
Okay.
Is probably the most famous example where he became this autistic person, and apparently the stories are that he would drive Tom Cruise absolutely crazy because he would behave that way all the time, right? And Tom Cruise was like, stop it. So,
Heath Ledger is the other example when he had the role of the Joker.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Heath Ledger was a method actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're about to release his diaries of that experience of becoming the Joker. So
Wow.
it's very interesting from a DTI perspective.
Absolutely. So if you're interested in seeing DTI in full effect, you'll definitely want to check out the diaries and also, of course, the book itself to see how this all works. So there's this dream incubation, unconscious part.
Right. So I met with Stanislavski in my dreams, and he showed me the method acting, which is kind of cool. So that's kind of the unconscious path, and then there's a bit more of a conscious path where you begin to examine specific incidents from the model's life, and we're really talking about we look for some incident in their childhood that turned them into the person they are. Okay, right? That created their core beliefs and values. We're looking for how they learn their skill. We're looking for how they express their skill at their best. We're looking for how they improved their skill, how they honed, sharpened the sword.
So we're looking at what sort of happened in their childhood, that one event that they can sort of say themselves that this is what made me decide this is who I was going to be.
Yeah.
Then how they developed the skill,
yeah.
How they mastered it,
yeah.
And then how they really honed it,
and then how they dealt with failure is the final one.
And then dealing with failure.
Yeah, because we all fail.
Okay.
So in my modeling project with Steve Jobs, it was when he got kicked out of Apple. What do you do? He went and started Pixar.
So what happens if you don't have very much biographical information?
There are different levels of quality of models in terms of the information available. The number one is somebody you know that you can go and speak to. Okay. The second one is somebody like Steve Jobs, where there's biographies, you can watch all the videos, you can watch all the presentations. I mean, you can get a really good feel. There are people where there's a good autobiography. Because when somebody writes their own life story, embedded in the way they've written it are their values and beliefs. Right. And then there's somebody where there's only a biography or something. Okay. So that's the range. You can do it with any of those, but you have to understand that if you do a DTI, say,
Is that possible? You can do that.
Yeah. But you're reliant upon biographies that were written centuries or at least decades after his death, and so the amount of information is limited. There's two of them, the Jesuits, right?
Yes.
They do a series of DTIs with Jesus.
The Jesuits.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's part of their spiritual growth. There's also a chapter on that in the book as well.
Fascinating. Okay, so you can do this. You can do this for the most part as long as you have some reasonable biographical.
Yeah. The more you have, the better.
Okay.
Right. So it's better if there's videos because it shows the physiology of the person.
Okay.
Okay. But you don't need it. You can do it if you have a sponsor.
But we're talking about even physiology. So someone like if you're a tennis player, for example, and you watch Serena Williams play, you could pick up on what kind of behavior she was doing.
Well, here's that. We'll get back to that.
Okay. All right.
So now we have these at least 5 events. It could be like 10 events or something. And we're looking at really what are the characteristics of the person in that event. Okay. And you make a movie of that event. A mental movie. You watch the movie, okay, and then you essentially float into the movie and you experience it. This is just in the research stage, okay. A lot of the DTI work is done as you're doing the research before the trance, and as long as you have your intention of I want to be different in this context of my life, and you're reading the biography, you're watching the videos on YouTube, you're going to get a lot of the benefits and the change.
So while you were thinking about and planning your deep trance identification process, the deep trance identification, the DTI, we'll say DTI so I don't have to trip over my tongue every time I say it. The DTI will be happening while you're doing it. Essentially while you're coming up with all these discoveries and insights about who this person is, what it is that you want from them, you are doing the work at that point.
Yes. You have to really imagine the scene, 3 dimensions, and then at some point go inside it and say, do I understand this?
Okay. So at this point, if you're watching and you're asking, okay, well, how does all this actually work? How does all this make sense? I mean, am I just going to imagine somebody, doing something, and I'm going to magically get their powers?
This is just the research piece. Okay. But you are getting a lot of the benefits by doing that. Okay. This is why in days gone past, the most popular type of book was a biography. Right? It's because people picked up, if they read about a biography of somebody who had a quality, right? Not like the latest pop star or something who takes drugs, right? You will pick up a lot of that stuff. But that's not the process. That's the research.
Is this, for example, we look at. I mean, coming from a musical background, I know that a lot of my peers sort of suffer from, the starving artist syndrome, where they see a lot of their favorite, their favorite musicians who struggled or got lost in drugs or something like that, had a terrible life, and now they feel like and now they're living that same sort of lifestyle, finding it very difficult to become successful because they feel like that's what it means to be a rock star, that's what it means to be famous.
That's a really interesting one, because that has the upfront issue of, well, if they're starving, that's a problem. There is a secondary game going on there with the identification of the archetype of being the starving musician. There's a certain positive quality in a lot of people's imaginings around that. And so when a musician sees that the people they idolize going through this, part of it is that, these guys are having these experiences, now I'm walking down the same path. Part of it is identifying with the archetype of being the starving musician who has integrity and hasn't sold out. So there is this other archetype wrapped up into it, and it is a deep trance identification process. I would agree.
Well, I think for me, the way to think about that is to think of the movie Whiplash. about the drummer. Okay, the movie is about how he became great. Right? It's not about whether he made a cent at the end of the day.
Right.
Right. It was about his process of learning. So a good way to think about it is somebody might come and say, "I want to be Michael Jordan." And, well, why do you want to be Michael Jordan? Because I want to be, a great basketball star and everyone loves me. Blah 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 blah. They want to be Michael Jordan at his best. Okay. But Michael Jordan was as good as he was because he was the first guy on the practice court and the last guy to leave. Right? So that's why we picked that second scene of how did this guy become as good as he was. Right? If you just want to be, oh, I see this rock star and I want to be that guy, or I see this starving artist and I'm gonna be that. It's like, no, I want to pick a person who honed their skill in some way, and that's part of what you as the DTIer need to pick up. It's not to pick up the skill as much as to pick up the attitude and the behaviors that led to the development of that skill. That's as important on one point.
So if you're doing DTI, you're not just going to wake up one day and have magic powers, right? What you're talking about here is learning, covering what attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, and values are that come with success.
Absolutely.
In whatever it is that you want to achieve success
think
with.
of Tiger Woods, right? Tiger Woods had the best swing in the world back in the day. And he wanted it better, so he totally deconstructed his swing. Even though it was working, it was the best swing in the world, he went back to basics because that was the only way he could improve. Right? Most of us would say, oh, got the best swing in the world? Hey, I'm in great shape, right? But if you DTI'd with him, one of the things, this is the sharpening of the axe, right, is how do you take genius and turn it into something even better? And how do you take that next step?
And the DTI process is something that can help you do that.
Right, because one of the scenes is how do they go from excellence to genius?
And this is an important point because at the end of the day, DTI isn't about just skills acquisition or learning. For me, anyway, DTI is about changing identities, letting go of barriers that would have limited us in terms of internal beliefs and values, things that in the past would have stood in the way of achieving goals and growing in skills. DTI is so much more than the external of the skills. It's about rearranging our internal maps to be even greater than what we were.
Okay. And so from this point then, we are uncovering biographical information so that we can sort of get the volume of how a person has developed.
It's not
these
just
skills.
the facts of the biographical information. It's also having the ability to visualize those.
Okay. So we've gathered this biographical information. What do we do next?
So next is the process of the DTI itself, which means you go into trance, and Rykoff said, the deeper the trance, the more profound the experience.
The deeper the trance.
Deeper the trance, more profound the experience.
Okay.
Rykoff did the regression. That means he took them back to childhood because children are always in trance. Grown-ups, they kind of go, yeah, I think I was, yeah, I can go into trance. But kids are always in trance. You see them, they play for hours with rocks and stuff, and they go, well, this rock is a house, and this rock is that's the school. And it's like, we're like, they're rocks. Kids, they're just rocks. And the kids are like, no, that's the house.
What happens when you put them on your head?
And this rock is my car, and I'm driving my rock kids to the school, right? Because they live in trance. So the deeper the trance, the more profound the change. Okay. If you don't have the ability, if you don't have a trance partner or someone to lead you into a deep trance and then experience those scenes in the trance, you've got a blue thing there. I don't know what the blue thing on the screen is.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, there's a blue thing on the screen, but it doesn't matter. You can still get a lot of the benefits, but the deeper the trance, the more profound the experience.
Okay. So
final step, you said about the physiology.
Right.
Okay. Obviously, part of the experience of going into that experience is the physiology. But there's something really important, and that is that you bring that physiology back to this place, this context.
What does that even mean?
What that means is when you first sit with the model and you build the rapport, you're looking for some action, some motion, some facial expression, a gesture which encapsulates that person. And then you're using that as what we would call a trigger and anchor in terms of NLP to lock that whole DTI experience into your physiology.
Okay.
So let me give you an example.
Sure.
Okay. If you look at somebody who is a mimic, a comic who, like, what's one that we...
Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey,
yeah.
right?
Oh, that was on the Tonight Show?
Yeah, he's done a bunch of them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where he's
Really good.
brilliant, right?
Yeah.
If you see him do any of those, when he first goes into the character, he does some tick, twitch, facial expression, gesture, right? Which triggers that whole DTI experience for him.
Okay, so he's learned he learned how to be this whatever character he's putting on, and then to remind him of all of those characteristics and vocal tonality, he'll perform a gesture, whether it's the way this particular character raises his eyebrows, and that eyebrow raising triggers the whole action. See, just because I raise my eyebrow.
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's absolutely.
and that acts as the reminder. Or
Yeah. So if you guys go onto YouTube and search for Kevin Spacey, Jimmy Fallon, you'll find this video where he does all these characters, and you'll see him do this initial. There'll be a link. This initial trigger where he gets into the character, and that's a really important part of the DTI, to lock the trigger in.
And the other aspect of having the physiology is you're then activating the motor cortex in the brain, and this is kind of the center of the brain.